Today, we are diving into a pretty dramatic story from nearly 1,000 years ago. But this isn't just a history lesson. Nope. It's a battle for intellectual integrity, a real fight over the soul of a tradition. And maybe, just maybe, it's a warning about what can happen when expertise gets challenged by pure arrogance.
And that really gets to the heart of what we're talking about today. What happens when knowledge gets completely cut off from where it came from? It's a huge question, right? It's about authority, about tradition, and about the kind of chaos that gets unleashed when the links in a chain of knowledge are deliberately snapped. So to figure this out, we've got to start at the beginning.
Okay, so before we get to the big conflict, we need to understand exactly what was on the line. We have to look at the ideal, the way things were supposed to be before it all went sideways. A system that was designed to be this perfect, unbreakable chain for passing down sacred knowledge.
Now, when you hear the word Kabbalah today, your mind probably jumps straight to mysticism, right? But that's actually a later idea. Originally, it meant something way more fundamental, the uninterrupted chain of tradition. It was the process, the very system, that guaranteed the authenticity and the authority of rabbinic teachings.
And believe me, this chain was everything. The idea was that knowledge flowed in this incredibly meticulous line. From the prophets, it was passed down to trustworthy witnesses, and then it was guarded by the Geonim, the heads of the great Talmudic academies in Babel. This unbroken sequence was the ultimate seal of approval, the guarantee of legitimacy.
And here's the key takeaway. The great academies, the yeshivat, they weren't just schools. They were seen as the legal guardians of the tradition itself. You can think of them as protectors of an intellectual inheritance that stretched all the way back to Sinai. Their authority, in theory, was supposed to be absolute.
But, no perfect system lasts forever, right? This one was about to face a totally new and, honestly, a dangerous challenge. And it came from within.
The great leader at the time, Sharira Gaon, he had a name for these challengers, a name that was both dismissive and, man, did it stick. He called them little foxes, seeing them as these sly little creatures, just nibbling away at the roots of this incredible intellectual tradition.
So who were these so-called little foxes? Well, they weren't your typical scholars, not by a long shot. We're talking about merchants, travelers, people who'd picked up just a tiny bit of learning on the side, a modicum, as the source puts it. But the real problem wasn't their lack of formal training, it was their arrogance. They actually believed that their shallow understanding gave them the right to challenge centuries of established tradition.
This really lays out the two completely different worlds we're talking about. On one side, you have the scholars of the yeshivat, all about discipline, precision, and that unbroken chain of authority. And on the other side, the little foxes. Their world was all about guesswork, arrogance, and, at the end of the day, just making stuff up. It was a total clash of ideas about what knowledge even is.
So this wasn't just some abstract academic debate. Oh no, it boiled over into a real, live, public showdown, an event that would go down in history as the Day of the Willow.
All right, so picture this. We're in 11th century Andalusia. It's the festival of Sukkot. A really respected scholar, Rabbi Samuel Hanagid, is about to witness something that perfectly captures this whole crisis. As he and a friend were just walking by a synagogue, their morning is suddenly shattered by what the text calls shrieking noises. And let me tell you, this was not the sound of prayer. It wasn't the sound of study. It was the sound of pure chaos.
So they look inside, and what do they find? A group of these so-called Talmudists. They'd basically stormed a class, and they were just yelling. Not debating, yelling. And the text is super specific here. They were mispronouncing every single word. In a tradition where every letter, every sound matters, this was the ultimate sign of disrespect, a total contempt for the rules of language.
And this is where we get to the core metaphor of the whole story. A poem written about this event compares these men to a bogus willow. Think about it. A proper willow, it grows by pure water. But this bogus willow, it just grows wild up on the mountains. It doesn't bear any fruit, and its leaves have a rough mouth. A perfect symbol for the kind of ugly, unrefined talk they were hearing that day.
So here it is, laid out plain and simple. You've got the authentic willow, right? It's nurtured by the pure fountain spring of the traditional academies. And then you have the bogus willow, wild, uncultivated, and arrogant. The poem uses this image to make a devastatingly clear point about the two types of learning. One is cultivated, the other is just chaos. Look, what happened that day wasn't just a one-off thing. It was a symptom of a much bigger sickness. And the fallout, well, it was going to be catastrophic for the tradition. And this right here is the absolute crux of the issue. When they threw out the basic rules of grammar, they were basically throwing out the idea of objective truth itself. The text could just mean whatever they felt like it meant. The source says it so well. It was as if language had no fixed moorings. Everything was just set adrift.
So what happened in the end? Well, that beautiful, unbroken chain, it shattered. What took its place was this kind of populist version of Judaism, one based on charisma and personal opinion, completely cut off from the rigorous, authoritative, and intellectual tradition of the great academies. The tradition had been corrupted.
And that brings us right back to where we started. This whole story from the 11th century feels incredibly familiar, doesn't it? In an age of instant information, where anyone can have a platform and expertise often gets shouted down, it leaves us with a pretty tough question. Who are the little foxes in our world today? And how on earth do we protect our own vital chains of knowledge before they get broken too?